You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast.
Are you excited to go back to school but haven't heard from your friends all summer? And are you also a victim of house elf bullying / salvation? How do you feel about giant snakes in your plumbing, having peeping ghosts distributing cursed diaries, and magical birds dropping magical hats that drop magical swords on your head? This is Systematic Geekology. We're the Priests of the Geeks, and this is the stuff that we will be talking about today. And I think that this going back to school theme here at Hogwarts is very important. And by the way, we're talking about Chamber of Secrets because all three of us on the pod are going back to school. We got Christian Ashley here. Christian, how are you?
All right, Nick, how are you?
I'm doing really well. And we've got Judy Noel here with us.
A little early for that one. Preview of things to come.
So we're talking about the Chamber of Secrets, but before we dive into this, just a little taste of what y'all been nerding out on. Christian, what have you been nerding out on lately?
Well, I just did a live stream earlier today for Friday Night Frights for our YouTube page on the paranormal for vampires, and I have been geeking out on the vampire forensics book that was written in association with National Geographic on how it could be possible for vampires to be a thing or how they've been a species across the centuries. It's been a lot of fun just digging into that.
That sounds cool. And also go subscribe to Systematic Geekology's YouTube channel. That's what you're missing if you're not subscribed. So vampires for Christian. What I've been nerding out on is that I actually just started watching Ted Lasso for the first time, way late to the show. But I got Apple TV rather. And that show is just absolutely delightful. I heard the hype, didn't feel a certain way about it. And as I've started it, it's just, wow. Yeah, I'm on board immediately. So such a great show. I can't wait to finish it. Just finished the second episode of season 1. So yeah, but you're not here to hear about Ted Lasso. You're here because we're talking about the Chamber of Secrets. But yeah, before we jump in, we received our letters. We talked about our houses. Last time we talked about the Sorcerer's Stone or the Philosopher's Stone for our people across the pond. But as we talked about that, and even we talked about our first impressions of the books as well as the movies, when we came to year 2 in our past experiences, after we got our letter, we're returning for our second year. I just wanted to know, how did Chamber of Secrets hit y'all? I want to hear how it hit y'all when you experienced it then, and maybe even how you feel about it now in light of as a sequel to the Sorcerer's Stone. I mean, we talked about the last episode how, we will protect Hagrid with our lives. Mm-hmm. And Hagrid gets done dirty in the Chamber of Secrets. And I just remember, because I, as we discussed, I was a movie person first before I came to the books, as the heretic I am. But I just remember watching that scene of Hagrid being taken to Azkaban, and I was just like, it was one of those where you're like yelling and throwing stuff at the TV. You're like, no.
Yeah. And this is before what we know is actually at Azkaban too.
Yeah, seriously. Well, I'm like, what's Azkaban? But Hagrid should not be going there right now.
Oh yeah.
So, there's a little taste of how I feel. Christian, why don't you hit us with your...
Yeah, for me, it was after having read the first book, getting into it. I think it was around this time that I read the second book. We had heard rumors there's a movie coming out. It's like, oh my gosh, yes. I want to see that on screen too. So reading Chamber of Secrets was like, I'm going to see this on screen too. And I'm imagining all the scenarios here of the Quidditch match and the basilisk and the Fawkes to Phoenix and all this amazing stuff. I want to see the Weasleys break Harry out of his house to save him from the Dursleys. I want to see, Lucius Malfoy get what's coming to him for the abuse he's given Dobby all these years. Yes. You can't see this, dear listeners, but we're getting the double bird from
No,
Judy.
I'm not allowed to say it. You guys told me I couldn't cuss, so I just wanted you guys to know how I actually felt about it. Just saying.
And she's restrained herself so well. Like, give her some credit. Yeah, I love this book so much. More than the first book. This is good.
Oh yeah, I love that. Keeping it PG-13 on the pod. Thank you, Judy. Yeah, I mean, that's how we all feel about Lucius Mouthway, who, is a dirty trash can full of poop. But,
Great way to say that without cussing. Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome. I stole that from the Surf's Up movie, so unoriginal. But, that's what we do at Systematic Geekology. We make references to various movies and nerd IPs. But Chamber of Secrets very similar, and of course, movie person. The first one's really good, right? The book's amazing. The world building is great. But of course, at that, I was a adolescent. I was probably like 11 or something when it came out. And, I wanted more action and I wanted more special effects, and it delivered. There's even from the book, returning later, you've got all this different action. The world is deeper. The magic seems to be more vast. Obviously, with the movies, you get Dobby. CGI has kind of evolved, in a lot of ways. And the Quidditch is crazy good. This time of movies too, the mixture between CGI and like practical effects, I feel like was at this really nice spot that I think was lost for a good 15 years. And then I think now people are starting to like come back and go back to like the CGI practical effects thing. Anyway, it was just a really magical time. And that's what I remember about it. And it drew me in, and here we are just nerding out about Harry Potter. But because of that, we talked about some of the new elements and things like that. But what were some new elements and characters that stuck out to you in the Chamber of Secrets? And which returning characters and elements were you most happy to encounter again? And we'll start off with you, Christian.
New elements. Visiting the Burrow is like a comfort place to me. The Weasley family as a whole, they're dysfunctional. They're all over the place, but they love each other. Like, they're in this hovel of a house that has just enough room for them to live together. They don't have a lot of money, a lot of fame, but they genuinely love each other, love watching out for each other, and then adopting Harry. Like, from the moment he comes in there, he's their son. And I think this is the first time we meet Arthur, because I don't know if we see him in Philosopher's Stone, Sorcerer's Stone. And yeah, seeing this guy who's just one of those people, like, he's just fascinated by new things. And I'm like, I totally get that. Like, you bring up something new to me, that's something I can understand easily, that's not like quantum physics or anything to do with math. Like, yeah, sure, I'm all in. I'm going to learn everything about it. Let's do this. And that's the Muggle world to him. And of course, then Dobby too, learning about house elves, how they're treated in this world, and the juggling all that together, fleshing that out. That's the new stuff I really like. Old stuff, my boys Fred and George. I mean, they came back. The heir of Slytherin stuff is going on. And what do? Make way for the heir of Slytherin. And just standing in front of Harry, just letting him know, like, hey, we're your bros. We know this isn't true, but we're going to capitalize on it to have fun with you. And Harry appreciates that. I love that so much.
Ah, man. Yeah. The Weasleys, we get a deepening of their family, and the Weasleys is a good, like, how people respond to the Weasleys, I feel like is a good litmus test for how good of a person somebody is. If you encounter the Weasleys and you're like, they're my least favorite characters in the book, perhaps besides Ron, well, maybe I'll give you a little bit for Ron, but yeah, like you said, if you don't like the Weasleys, you're gone. 100%. No. So Judy, also having very strong opinions about the Weasleys. What about you? These new elements, and also the elements that you were like, I'm so glad to be back at Hogwarts.
Yeah. So first things first, I want to know the spell to make my dishes wash themselves, because Molly
Amen.
Weasley is my queen.
Amen.
Like, I'm going to break the rule. She is a badass. Like, she keeps everything in line. The house might be kind of a wreck, but I tell you what, dinner's cooked, dishes done, kids are taken care of, husband's a little crazy, but she loves him, right? I love getting that sneak peek at the Weasleys because, you know, in the first book, you meet Ron, you get introduced to the family, you get a taste of Molly, but like here, now we get to experience what I think is one of the most wholesome themes throughout the book is the love that's experienced in that house. So I'm a huge fan of the Weasleys. I also love Jenny specifically because she starts off, you know, so quiet. She's timid. She isn't quite as timid in the book as she is in the movie. I think she gets, you know, she doesn't quite get the credit she deserves in the movie sometimes. But knowing the person she grows into, it's kind of cool to like see how she, to like get reminded how she starts in this storyline. I'm also a huge fan of Dobie, obviously. At first, you know, when you don't know what's coming, right? Your first introduction to Dobie, you're like, what a jerk, bro. Like, you're going to kill this kid. What are you doing? Like, but it's not until later you realize, like, man, he knew how bad it could have been. And he was willing to do anything to protect Harry. And it wasn't until, you know, late, of course, at the end of the book that Harry begins to realize that and then gives Dobie the best gift. And which we'll dive into in a little bit. But I also, okay, you know, spoiler alert. And we don't realize that the Diary of Tom Riddle is a Horcrux. But
Yes.
I love that it starts here and we have no idea how important this piece is going to become as the story unfolds through the rest of the book. So I think it's really cool that she kind of sneaks it in here, but like not really letting us know the first clue about what that's really going to look like until, you know, well into the series. But my favorite part about coming back to Hogwarts, I think, although it begins with Fred and George and Ron breaking Harry out of his room at number 4 Privet Drive.
Oh yeah.
I love the camaraderie. Like, I love how happy they are to be back together. Like, even when they're school shopping in Diagon Alley and like they all kind of reunite, like that feeling, like, man, I'm back. Like, I'm back at home. I'm back with my people. Like, that's a great feeling. You know, I think about, you know, times when we've been separated, you know, as adults, we can appreciate that, right? Like we end up getting separated from friends, you know, by distance or, you know, life happens, right? But that moment of like reuniting together, man, it's special. So like, I can't imagine for Harry how special that is, knowing like he kind of lives in hell with the Dursleys. So the relief, the joy that had to come, and you can really feel that. You can in the movie too, but in the book, like, man, it's very apparent how happy he is to be back. So that's probably my favorite part of being back at Hogwarts.
Yeah. The just the fact that, like Christian said earlier, that they just adopt him immediately. You know, Harry, the Weasleys adopt Harry, and you brought that up too. And it's just like their family immediately, you know, even because we didn't get to spend a whole lot of time, obviously, with the Weasleys in the first book, but now here we are diving in. You know, I think for me, one of my favorite new things, it's the one that stuck out to me, I guess, rather than my favorite. But I remember, you know, from the first movie, seeing the scene where they go into Diagon Alley, and you're just like, okay, this is the wizarding world, dude. This is crazy.
Yeah.
And I think from the Chamber of Secrets, when they use the flu powder and they end up going to Nocturne Alley, and you're like, whoa, that was cool. The flu powder was cool, but it's almost like this, it's like anticlimactic sort of. And you're in this place where it's like, oh, this is not Diagon Alley. Where are we? Like, this is, you get that dark, you get a little intro into how dark the tone is going to set for the wizarding world. Because we don't get started, we get the Weasleys, but when we get into like the full thrust wizarding world, it's not Diagon Alley. It's Nocturne Alley. It's dangerous and freaky. So that's one that sticks out to me, and I think probably sets the tone for the book and the movie. And then of course returning is just going back to Hogwarts, just what J.K. Rowling does and what the movies do well is that they bring this Gothic, literary element of like the castle. That's like, normal Gothic literature. You go and you're like, oh, okay, maybe this person's connected to this rich duke or something. And now there's monsters or, something like that. But Harry feels more at home here than he does in his suburban hell. And I think that there's just something obviously magical about being able to make readers and viewers feel that strongly connected to a spooky, what would stereotypically be a spooky castle. So I mentioned that it shifts in tone. And I think we've all talked about like the basilisk and the Horcrux gets introduced, and we start off, Nocturne Alley, and things are just kind of feeling off. And of course, the books kind of grow with the characters, with our main crew here. So the older they get, the more mature the themes get, the deeper the books get, et cetera, et cetera. But how hard do we feel like the shift is from the Chamber of from the Sorcerer's Stone to the Chamber of Secrets? And Judy, I don't know if you feel like it really hits hard, or if you're like, this is a nice pace here.
It's interesting. I told you guys that I'd kind of like looked over the outline and kind of jotted some notes down to have my thoughts together. And this is one question I did not answer. Like I did not have notes on because I'm really conflicted. I think, and I don't really remember how I felt when I first read it. But I do think now in hindsight, right, having read it multiple times, I think you fall in love so hard with the first one.
Yeah.
Like you love the story so much. And like you said, she does a great job of like world building in the first one. And the enchantments and the moving staircases and the tables that just magically you like fill up with food at every meal, and the floating candles in the top of the dining hall, and having to talk to the fat lady's picture to get into the Gryffindor common room. Like, you fall in love with all of these like cool aspects, and you're like, man, that would be awesome to live there. And you get excited to go back for a year or two, and you're like, holy, what is happening right now? Like, but I do think that you're so in love with the characters that even though the shift is like it's a huge dynamic like change. Like it's a huge, like it's almost a paradigm shift. Like you go from this like just dreamy fantasy world that you wish you could be a part of to like, I do not want to end up in Nocturne Alley. I do not know what this Chamber of Secrets is, but it sounds horrid. Like, what do you mean Harry can hear the snake talking in the walls? Like, suddenly you start to experience all these dark elements, and it does shift the way you look at Hogwarts, but you're so in love with the story that I don't feel like it hits as hard as it probably should. Now, for someone who didn't fall in love with the story and was just reading it to reading it, like, yeah, I can see how it would probably be, it almost feel disjointed, but I'm biased. I love it.
No, that's great.
So.
Yeah, inducing, what we love Judy for best, bringing out all of the Judy elements, all the good things. We love you for that, Judy. Christian.
You mentioned like the books growing up with the characters, but like they also grow up with the audience too.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated not being babied, by an author, and say like, hey, like you're growing up with Harry too. You're able to go through the things that he's going through and experience them with him and Harry. It's gonna be Ron and Hermione, as like they're very close to dying by some unknown means. Like they get petrified. Like what is causing that? Like we had like an evil person working with, Wizard Hitler last, book, but like there's a new element here. What happens here? How do we go into a worse villain, or is it a worse villain? And experiencing younger Voldemort at this time and learning his relationship to the school in the same way that Harry has. It's like it both feels like home to him. That may be from another book, but it's that that sense of I am growing with them, and I appreciate being handled well by an author that says, you're not an idiot, you're not a child, you're growing up. You can handle a lot worse themes as time goes on.
Oh, man, such a great point about not being babied. Tolkien wrote in one of his essays about fairy tales about how fairy tales are wrongly attributed to children. And that, he talks about as we get older, we don't drink milk. We don't just drink milk forever, right? We eventually move on and eat bigger things. And so should writing. And so fairy tales, fantasy doesn't have to be, nursery rhymes, and I think that J.K. Rowling, I think you're right about growing up with the audience and how she doesn't baby her readers, where, you're bringing all these darker elements, right? You've got more dangers. You got the Whomping Willow, the Basilisk, Aragog, like all, Tom Riddle is, Voldemort's just not teaming up with a bad guy. He's manipulating a child to do terrible things. Like it just goes crazy, but she allows us to wrestle with these things. And I think that obviously as kids we did, and I think we still wrestle with those things as adults, and Harry Potter, I think, probably equipped us to maybe address those things in our own lives, maybe even better, or maybe better than most people who didn't read Harry Potter.
It's interesting. I didn't think about this in that way until Christian, you were talking about, growing up with the audience and how she, starts to ease us into these darker elements. But, like you said, he's, Voldemort is literally a creepy guy on the back of a teacher's head in the first book. But in this book, he materializes out of the diary. And so now, no, he's not as scary as he will be as the books come. But now it's the threat has grown a little bigger, the depth of the fear that Harry feels is a little bigger. The threat grows a little bit with each book, and it becomes more complex, and there's more elements to it. And, when you start digging into the books that follow, you start to realize just how deeply rooted, not just for Harry and his life, but for Hogwarts and for the Wizarding world, and how that energy that from that one night when Voldemort, what they thought had met his doom, and at the hands of this mother who loved her son so much that her love protects him. That one night not only changed Harry's life, but changed everyone's life. And that, I think that's cool. You start to get more pieces of the story in that as Voldemort also grows, with us. So it's kind of cool.
Oh, so good. And just like with everything else, these deeper elements of danger bring, the wins are just better, but the stakes are so much higher than I think the first book too. So, when they play the chess match and Ron is very injured, and then Harry, obviously his life is in danger in every single book. But I mean, the Chamber of Secrets, it's Harry, of course, these Muggle-born wizards, right?
Yeah.
And the Half-Bloods, and then Hermione, and then, Ginny, who is, and then of course Harry gets bitten by the tooth as he stabs him. So he's going to die. All these things are inevitably terrible. But then when these wins happen, I feel also the danger's turned up to 11, but so is the triumph. And I think we just feel that victory high at the end of Chamber of Secrets. And I think probably is part of the reason why, I think we return to it. But, I talked about the different elements because we get introduced to so many different things. The Whomping Willow, we learn about that. Okay, Diagon Alley has been extended. We go back to learn about Aragog and the spiders, and there's a long relationship with Hagrid, and apparently Hagrid and Voldemort went to school together, and the Basilisk and Moaning Myrtle, all this stuff. So that's why I'm talking in this cadence, because it literally is all over the place. And I think that as a kid, you're just in it, right? You're not maybe paying attention to the narrative structure or what have you. But as an adult, that was one of the things that as I've analyzed it, I'm man, it feels a little disjointed, as you said, Judy. But not in a way that takes away from the magic. I don't know though. So as an adult, I've kind of felt like it might be a little too much. I'm not going to lie. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, it's a little too much. But I might be wrong. I don't know. Do you guys feel like it was just the amount of right ingredients to like throw us further down the rabbit hole of the wizarding world?
Yeah. I think with what she's introducing here, building up on what she already has before, and then continuing on with, this is how house elves are treated in this society. This is how, this rivalry between the four houses was from the very foundation of this school a thing. And just the racism inherent in Salazar Slytherin's worldview was just that big that he made something away from everyone else just so his lineage could continue thinking the same way he did. That's evil.
Yeah.
And I am a very convoluted writer, so I am always in favor of making something larger and epic, but tying it together in a way that even though it's convoluted on the surface, you just have to take time to read it. Versus like I'm throwing stuff all over the place and here's 50 different terms for how my elves say the word snow or something ridiculous like that. Like that's a different type of convoluted. You have to learn, like you don't need to read the Silmarillion to understand, the Lord of the Rings. It enhances your understanding of the story, but like, and I really appreciate Tolkien made it, but yeah, like when it, and I'm not saying he's convoluted too bad, but like he's
he is
the
for
convoluted,
sure.
like, no, I mean like he's the convoluted of there is a reason for everything happening here, and if you want to come on the journey with me to understand it, we can do that, or you can just have what I have here.
Yeah. I like that answer. I really like, I hadn't thought about just more of like, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you can. These elements are here to prop up, basically the journey we're going on. And that's cool that you can ride that train. And it, obviously, I think all of us loved it. And every time I rewatch that, and even with my own adult brain, criticisms, I still love returning to the Chamber of Secrets. Judy, what about you?
So, I actually gave this question a lot of thought today because, there are a lot of new elements introduced, lots of new characters, lots of new pieces of the world, and I think that my like my initial reaction was like, yeah, that is a lot. But when I start to think about it, like, does it feel like a lot because I know how all of those elements will play later on? Like, I don't know that when I first read it, I really felt overwhelmed by all these new elements. I didn't know the weight they would carry, like I didn't know that the Whomping Willow, we'd later find out, was planted, for a specific reason and, trying to, prevent conversation, or, using conversation topics for, later episodes. But, when you think about all of the things that were introduced, like all of them play a deeper role, whether it's throughout the rest of the series or we just hear them mentioned and there's like, we get the background of those different things later. But I feel like she did a really great job of taking all those new elements and not making them, she added to the depth of the story without making it feel like it was just clustered. I feel like he introduced enough of each one to like make the story work and make it interesting and pull you in, but not, she didn't give us everything all at once. I really think she was like planting the seeds so that they could all grow in their own time. You know what I mean? Like that they would develop later. And now if I read the second book, I feel like I would be like, man, so much stuff gets introduced here, like things that become so important later. But in that book, like the only time we really talk about the Whomping Willow is the fact that it beat the brains off of the flying car when Harry and Ron fly to Hogwarts because Dobby shut down, the pathway to get to King's Quarters to leave for Hogwarts on the train. Like, other than that, other than them getting caught and like trying to duck and not get beat up, like we don't know anything more about the tree. Later we will, but now it's just funny that the tree was trying to beat him up,
Yeah, no, I love that, and as I hear you talk, I kind of maybe feel a little bit like I'll backtrack, big Lord of the Rings guy in the Council of Elrond chapter is famous for like, it's just talking. It's literally like Gandalf.
Yeah.
Let me just give you thousands of years of lore. Elrond, thousands of years of lore. And as you have to be kind of a special person to be like, oh yeah, I'm diving in deep. But J.K. Rowling does that thing where we spend just enough amount of time to, like you said, plant that seed. So we're like, okay, Aragog, there's a relationship there with Hagrid, the Whomping Willow. And then when we come back, it's these familiar relationships and characters and elements that we're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And it's not too much where we're like, oh, I have to go back to the index of the Chamber of Secrets to find out what's happening. Yeah. Okay, I might be changing my mind on that. I like it.
Live on the
in
show.
connection with that, I think she does a really good job of like, she gives us pieces of the background story of Harry Potter, not necessarily in any order. Like it's not like we're going through like this chronological timeline, but I think she develops and gives us some of the background that's relatable to what's happening in the book. So it just feels like it fits, And so the seeds that, some of the seeds that were planted in the first book start to come alive a little bit more in this book, and she continues to do that throughout the entire series. And like you said, she didn't give us so much when it first got introduced that we feel like we have to go back and reread the whole section. Although I did do that sometimes because I'm like, now wait a minute. But I think she does a really good job of letting the story unfold in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming, but like keeps you excited and wanting to read more.
Yeah. Agreed wholeheartedly. Yeah. I feel converted. Hallelujah. I'm saved now.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
If only evangelism was that easy.
No, literally though. So, we talked a little bit about, Voldemort coming back, and Judy mentioned that we actually get to see him basically incarnated. At least he's not super tangible, but he's basically there. And as soon as Ginny's dying, he's getting stronger, et cetera, et cetera. And one of my favorite aspects of Harry Potter is just that the bad guys, no matter how close they get to winning, they always lose, and it's always by their own devices. And, we do get some of that in the first book, but, there's a little help from the love magic, right? It's still the greed and like the, Voldemort needs the stone and can't help himself and gets killed by the love magic or whatever, which is caused by killing his parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, so that's there. But this is where we directly get the weapons 100% employed by Voldemort, with the basilisk and everything, and the diary. And it's the diary is left unguarded, and Harry gets a basilisk fang and destroys it. And it's basically all Tom Riddle's fault for getting Harry Potter there in the first place, or at least creating circumstances where that's more possible for him to do. So anyway, is this still, is that a good element to have? Like, is this, Tolkien did this too, but is this just kind of a 20th century, early 21st century trope? Needs to die, like Tom Riddle in his diary? Or, do you think it's still a good element, and does it need to stick around in literature, pop culture, et cetera, to give us hope in the real world? Yeah. So what do you think about that, Judy?
So it's funny. I never really thought about, I guess I knew that element existed. And it makes a lot of sense when I was thinking about it, but I think it's kind of a weird, manifestation of like, you reap what you sow.
Mm-hmm.
Like what you intend for my harm will be used for my good. Like I think that I'm a firm believer that good prevails, even if it's not in a traditional sense. Even if it doesn't feel good in the moment. Like you think about all that Harry's endured throughout this book. You think about Hermione being petrified. You think about poor Filch's cat. Bless his heart. He was just a mess. You think about, poor Hermione and turning into a cat because she grabbed the wrong hair off of, that Slytherin's robe. Like, it's just been a series of unfortunate events and near-death experiences and fear beyond belief. And now here they are laying in the chamber, and the damn bird brings a hat. Like, what in the world am I going to do with a hat when a snake the size of Texas is rolling around in the pipes and the diary's coming to life? Like, what? A hat? And then, you start to realize that, like, not only does Fawkes coming show Harry's loyalty to Dumbledore, not only does the Sorting Hat have the power to provide the Sword of Gryffindor, which is one of the few things that is going to be able to slay this basilisk, but just to go ahead and, like, put the cherry on top, I'm going to take this horrid beast's fang and I'm going to, like, reduce you to nothing. Like, all of this crazy nonsense around me, and the one thing that was supposed to destroy us is the very thing that will destroy you. Like, you don't feel like it's good in the moment, and yeah, you get this, like, burst of triumph at the end, but it almost feels lackluster when you think about all that they've endured. But it's like, no, man, like, there's a powerful lesson in that. Like, to be able to say, like, I don't care what stands against me. Like, if it's, well, what comes from the heart defiles us, right? So if I'm standing brave, knowing, I mean, surely, as young as Harry may have been, surely he had to know that the chances didn't look so good, right? Like, I mean, that was a really big snake, and you were down here by yourself with a bird and a hat. Like, and, a jacked up professor who's, this charm backfires. Now, he doesn't remember who he is, which he was a liar to begin with and was no help anyway. But, his best friend's sister's dying. There's this massive snake that he's trying to fight. Like, all of these elements are just madness, but he still stood so courageous. Like, he still stood, like, ready to take on whatever it was, even if it meant death. And he had to know that. And so I feel like when you have that kind of commitment, when you have that kind of faith, that till my last breath, I'm going to fight for the good. Like, it's then that we see that change of events. So all that being said, I love that theme throughout the books. I love that she uses all of these negative things that just feel so awful and allow them to be used for their good and for their triumph.
Yeah. Well said. Well, so we didn't even mention our boy Gilderoy Lockhart, but the Kim Kardashian of the wizarding world, famous for fame's sake, for and we hate you collectively. So Christian,
him losing his memory is one of the best wins of the book. I'm just
one
saying.
of the best wins. Yeah, no doubt. It's a kip.
Right, coward.
Yeah. It's a kip from Napoleon. Go ahead, Christian. Go ahead.
Yeah, from supplemental material, you learn Dumbledore hired him because he knew some of the people that he'd obliviated and knew that they had done those things instead. So he's setting him up this entire time for failure.
That's fantastic.
That's gangster.
Oh, man, yeah.
Dumbledore.
That's why you don't mess with Dumbledore.
No doubt.
My God.
And you also know Dumbledore also knows about the curse too on the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you got to think he knows he's not going to last a year.
Right.
That's one of those dark elements where I'm like, I do love you, Dumbledore. I do love you. I did not know that. That is great.
Yeah, I just learned about this the other day while I was doing my research. But to answer the question, I love this trope because it's so true to life of people causing their own downfalls. How many dictators have been so afraid of rebellion that they kill the wrong person and cause it? We have Herod so afraid of Jesus that he massacres infants. And yet 30 some years later, Jesus dies on a cross and saves everyone. Who's Herod? Some loser who failed completely.
Yeah.
No one cares. We have so many examples throughout history. I mean, even ourselves, we can make ourselves the villain because we act in villainous ways. How many times have I been brought down by my own pride or by saying the wrong lie or talking to the wrong person and beating them down and them coming back and swinging correctly against the evil that I've done. Like, it's the same way with Voldemort here. Even in his Tom Riddle form, like he was about to be kicked out of school because he kept trying to murder Muggleborns. And he realizes, oh, well, we learn later on why he doesn't want to go out to go to the orphanage. But through his own evil and the death that he caused, he was going to lose the one place he felt like he belonged. So even just at that age, and then later on for the diary, like as Judy, you put it up perfectly, setting things up for failure there because he is so prideful, because he's so egotistical, he has to have Harry know, like, you're going to go to the depths of despair and I'm going to send this basilisk against you. You are a 12-year-old wizard. You have no business fighting against this thing. I'm going to revel in you dying like the punk that I think you are. And he gets undone by a bird in a hat. That he never would have counted.
A bird and an old, filthy, floppy hat.
And Lockhart as well. Like this whole time, he's used the Obliviate spell to mess with people. And one of the things we've talked about before, Rowling is such a great a master of the Chekhov's gun, of Ron's wand snapping really early on because of the Whomping Willow. It backfiring on him to where he's the one, like eating, in like belching out slugs. Mm-hmm. And Lockhart, whose wand does he pick up? The wrong one. Mm-hmm. Like this whole time you've been causing other people to forget. Now it's your turn, buddy.
Yeah.
And it's your turn to go to St. Mungo's.
That's so funny. Yes.
Man.
Yeah, I think this is a trope. Like, yeah, it's very idealistic, but it's also very rational too, because who causes our own ends? A lot of the times it's us.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't agree more with everybody. I kind of put it in there just to play devil's advocate. But just because I think it really is I think it's true and logical, where throughout history you see the downfall of the terrible of dictators and terrible people, even interpersonal relationships, where they bring about their own downfall. And even if you want to bring it to like silly casual stuff, as soon as you let yourself get in the way, you ruin it for yourself, right? Maybe there's that boyfriend or girlfriend or somebody we're trying to date, and normally we're acting cool and someone's like, hey, you know what, she's kind of digging on you, and then you start dressing different and you start acting different, and then they never want to see you again because you're a gross, the person they didn't know who you were. Obviously very silly, but I think there's a relatability there where pride is the downfall and humility is what ultimately has power. We see that with the hobbits, right? We see that with the bird and the hat and Harry as an orphan hanging out with the Weasleys with his hand-me-down clothes and all this other stuff. And Dobby, and of course, connecting that to Jesus as a carpenter who basically takes down the Roman Empire by dying on a cross. Anyway, I think that trope needs to be incorporated more into stories. We need hope, especially in a world that seems like hope is hard to come by. So,
amen, brother.
Thanks, Harry Potter. Thanks. So, anything else we want to say about the Chamber of Secrets before we jump to recommendations?
I'm good to go. I mean, there's plenty more, but we also only have so much time.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk for a really long time about this book. There's lots of really great things. But if you haven't read it, read it. Like that's the recommendation. That's the tweet. Read the book. So good.
Second, the recommendation. Read the book.
Dobby is a free elf.
Ooh.
For the record.
You'll not harm Harry Potter again. Boom.
Listen. Yes, I do want to talk about one more thing. I just feel like this for Dobby. May he rest in peace. Spoiler alert. Sorry, but still, my guy. I want to applaud the actor who played Lucius Malfoy, because the disgust on his face when he realizes that Harry hands him the same diary that he snuck to Ginny Weasley and hands it back to him with a big old hole in the middle of it, and gets that dirty sock, throws it to Dobby, and realizes what has happened, that he has now freed his elf, is magic. Best win of the book. Best win of the book.
Yeah, especially when in hindsight what he's done by allowing that diary to be destroyed, and how pissed Voldemort is when he realizes.
Yeah. Like it is the best slice of revenge and humble pie, like all wrapped up into one. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
F for the record.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, double birds to Lucius Malfoy. So, listeners, it's been a great time to hang out with y'all. Judy, Christian's been a great time. Be on the lookout for Prisoner of Azkaban listeners, and also Jacob Isaacs, who is the guy who played Lucius Malfoy, played Admiral Zhao in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So he's just great at playing villains. And so also be on the lookout for some Avatar content. And in order for you to do that, you need to find Systematic Geekology on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube, on Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your nerdy content. And, we will be here. We're going to be rocking some stuff. And we just want to thanks for being here. Thank you all for being here. So just remember too, as we end our time together, that we are a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Peace out.
This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.